What if I told you that dragons, cyclopes, and even unicorns aren't entirely the stuff of fairy tales? What if, behind every ancient legend, there's a real animal, a rare medical condition, or even just an incredibly unique set of circumstances? Today, we're not here to tell fairy tales. Instead, we're diving deep into scientific theories that explain the origins of the most famous mythical creatures. Prepare to be amazed, because some of these explanations are far more astonishing than the myths themselves. Our ancestors lived in a world shrouded in mystery. They stumbled upon gigantic bones, glimpsed strange creatures in the twilight, and wrestled with the inexplicable. Their vivid imaginations, combined with these real-world observations, gave birth to the very monsters we know today. So, let's separate fact from fiction. Let's kick things off with the undisputed king of mythical creatures, the dragon. Massive, winged, fire-breathing serpents. They're recognised across every corner of the globe, from the ancient tales of China to the legends of medieval Europe. But where did this powerful image originate? Scientists have a remarkably compelling theory. Picture an ancient farmer, diligently ploughing his field. Suddenly, his plough strikes something massive and unyielding. He starts digging, unearthing gigantic curved bones that resemble the ribs of some unimaginable beast, or perhaps a colossal skull, its teeth as long and sharp as daggers. What was he to think? He had never witnessed anything remotely like it before. Naturally, he concluded, these were the remains of some colossal monster. Today, of course, we know these were the fossilized bones of dinosaurs. But thousands of years ago, the science of paleontology didn't exist. So, giant vertebrae became the dragon's tail, massive ribs its formidable chest cavity, and human imagination filled in the blanks, scales, mighty wings, and of course the terrifying ability to breathe fire. Thus, in essence, the legends of dragons represent humanity's earliest, most imaginative, and perhaps most naive attempt at paleontology. But what about griffins? Those creatures with the body of a lion, but the head and wings of an eagle. This legend, too, likely has its roots in ancient bones. Scholars believe the myth of the griffin first emerged among ancient Scythian nomads. These people mined gold in the Altai Mountains bordering the Gobi Desert, and it was there, in the Gobi, that they discovered vast quantities of dinosaur skeletons, which we now identify as protoceratops. Now take a close look at a reconstruction. The protoceratops had a powerful eagle-like beak. It had 4 sturdy limbs and a body that could easily be mistaken for a lion's. And what about the bony frill around its neck? An ancient observer could easily envision that as the perfect base for mighty wings. But here's the most fascinating part. Protoceratops often perished while guarding their egg clutches. So, the gold-seeking Scythians would find these skeletons right beside fossilized nests. And that's how the legend of the griffin was born. Fierce guardians protecting untold treasures. Now, let's shift our focus and journey to the sunny Mediterranean islands, straight into the pages of Homer's Odyssey. There, we encountered the cyclopes, fierce, one-eyed giants. This legend seems so fantastical, it's almost impossible to believe. Yet even here, science offers a surprisingly simple and logical explanation. And once again, it all comes down to fossils. On the islands of Crete, Sicily, and Malta, paleontologists have unearthed numerous skulls of extinct dwarf elephants. Now imagine an ancient Greek stumbling upon one of these skulls. It's enormous, far larger than a human head, but most strikingly, right in the centre of this skull, there's a single, large, round opening. An ancient human, unfamiliar with elephant anatomy, wouldn't have known this was the nasal cavity where a trunk was once attached. To them, it would have been obvious. This was the skull of a giant with a single massive eye socket. The actual eye sockets of the elephant located on either side are far smaller and much less noticeable. Thus, a simple lack of anatomical knowledge, combined with a vivid imagination, transformed the skull of a prehistoric elephant into the head of a mythical monster. Now let's pivot to a creature that couldn't be more different from those brutal cyclops. We're talking about the most graceful and magical of beings, the unicorn. The iconic image of a pristine white horse, adorned with a single spiralling horn on its brow, feels like something straight out of a fairy tale. Yet even this enchanting legend has a surprisingly real, albeit far less graceful prototype. And once again, paleontology comes to our rescue. Meet the Elasmotherium, often referred to as the Siberian unicorn. This was a colossal, extinct rhinoceros that once roamed the vast steppes of Eurasia. Unlike its modern relatives, it possessed a single enormous horn, up to 2 meters long, that grew straight from its forehead, not from its snout. Can you picture that? An enormous, woolly, elephant-sized beast, sporting a massive horn right on its brow. It's entirely possible that our distant ancestors encountered the last of these Elasmotheriums. Stories of this mighty creature, passed down through generations, likely grew in detail over time, evolving into the legend of the beautiful and elusive unicorn. The fierce beast's image eventually transformed into a symbol of purity, yet the crucial detail, a single horn on its forehead, remained remarkably consistent. Now, let's plunge into the cold, dark waters of the North Atlantic, where legend tells of the terror of all sailors, the Kraken. Legends painted it as a monster the size of a floating island, capable of dragging entire ships to the abyss simply by coiling its gigantic tentacles around them. Sounds like pure fiction, doesn't it? Yet, in a rare twist, reality turned out to be almost as awe-inspiring. The source of these spine-chilling accounts was almost certainly the giant and colossal squid. These creatures are no myth. They genuinely exist, dwelling in the ocean's immense depths, and can reach up to 18 meters in length, roughly the height of a 6-story building. Now picture an 18th century sailor. These creatures were a rarity for them to witness. But then, imagine, after a violent storm, an enormous semi-decomposed carcass washes ashore, sporting an eye the size of a dinner plate. Or perhaps, during a voyage, he catches sight of a single, gigantic tentacle, thicker than his ship's mast, rising menacingly from the waves. Naturally, his imagination filled in the terrifying blanks. So, the Kraken isn't entirely a myth after all. It's more an awe-inspiring, albeit greatly exaggerated portrait, born from real encounters, with one of our planet's most mysterious and massive inhabitants. Let's stay in the ocean depths for a moment, because the Kraken wasn't the only monster to terrorize sailors. Giant sea serpents appeared just as frequently, in ship logs and on ancient maps. Eyewitnesses described them as incredibly long creatures, writhing on the surface of the water and capable of swallowing a person whole. And once again, scientists have a very plausible candidate for this role. And it's not a mythical beast, but a very real fish. Meet the oarfish, also known as the ribbonfish. It's the longest bony fish in the world, with a body that can reach up to 11 meters in length. Yet, it's incredibly thin and flat, like a ribbon, and boasts a striking silvery sheen. Now imagine such a fish, sick or dying, surfacing from the deep. It writhes in the waves. Its long, red dorsal fin could easily be mistaken for a crest or a mane. From a distance, a sailor sees a long, shimmering, serpentine body moving across the water. Naturally, he'd mistake it for a sea serpent. Although the oarfish is harmless and typically dwells at great depths, its rare appearances on the surface likely spawned countless stories about monstrous sea creatures. Well, since we're on the topic of sea legends, we can't possibly ignore mermaids, beautiful maidens with fishtails, whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their watery graves. What could be more fantastical, you might ask? Yet, there's a rather down-to-earth and even somewhat amusing explanation. Just try to put yourself in the shoes of a 15th century sailor. You've been at sea for months, surrounded by nothing but salt water, scorching sun, and the same male faces day in and day out. You're longing for home, for women. Then one evening, at sunset, you spot some creature emerging from the water near distant rocks. It swims slowly and gracefully, keeping its head above the surface, and sometimes even cradles a young one against its chest, much like a human mother. From a distance, its silhouette could easily appear feminine. Your imagination takes over. You start to see long hair, hear beautiful singing. In reality, though, you're most likely looking at a manatee or a dugong. These large marine mammals, also known as sea cows, can indeed be mistaken for a human from a distance. So, the legend of mermaids is probably the result of tiredness, prolonged abstinence, and very poor eyesight among sailors. Let's head back to land and journey high into the mountains to the snowy forests of the Himalayas and North America. This is where, according to legend, elusive hominids make their home, the Yeti, or abominable snowman, and its American cousin, Bigfoot, a massive, fur-covered, ape-like creature said to elude human contact. Unlike many other myths, belief in these creatures persists to this day. But what does science have to say about them? One of the most intriguing theories connects these legends to Gigantopithecus. This was a genus of giant extinct apes that roamed Asia hundreds of thousands of years ago. They stood almost 3 meters tall and weighed over half a ton. Officially, they're believed to be extinct. But what if a small relic population managed to survive in remote, inaccessible regions? Imagine an ancient human encountering such a giant. That would undoubtedly leave an indelible mark on our collective memory. Of course, there's no direct scientific proof of the Yeti's existence. However, the hypothesis of surviving Gigantopithecus offers a captivating scientific mystery, potentially explaining why descriptions of the abominable snowman are so strikingly similar across various cultures. Let's descend from the mountains now, into deep caves and underground realms, the world of dwarves and goblins. In the folklore of many cultures, they are depicted as short, stout creatures, skilled miners and smiths, dwelling beneath the earth and often unfriendly towards humans. It seems like pure fantasy, an allegory for the forces of nature. But some anthropologists propose a truly bold and fascinating theory. What if these myths are a distorted echo of real encounters? Memories from a time when our ancestors, Homo sapiens, weren't the only intelligent beings on the planet. We shared the world with other human species. For instance, with Neanderthals, who were shorter than us, but physically much more robust. Or even more intriguingly, with the so-called hobbits from the Indonesian island of Flores. This was a species of diminutive humans, Homo floresiensis, standing only about a metre tall. Imagine our taller ancestors encountering these small yet intelligent beings. They might have seemed strange, alien, cave-dwelling to them. Over time, as these species died out, the memories of them could have evolved into legends of a mysterious little folk living beneath the earth. Let's shift our focus to a more modern era and a different region, Latin America. It was there in the late 20th century that the legend of the Chupacabra was born. Literally, the name translates to goat sucker. The creature was described as a terrifying, reptilian or alien-like being that would attack livestock and drain them completely of blood. The story quickly became a global sensation. However, once scientists and veterinarians began their investigations, the myth rapidly unravelled. In the vast majority of cases where a chupacabra was actually caught or photographed, it turned out to be a perfectly real animal. Most often, it was a coyote, less frequently a raccoon, or even a feral dog. But why did they look so gruesome and unusual? The answer is simple: sarcoptic mange, or, more simply, a severe form of scabies caused by mites. This disease leads to complete hair loss, causing the animal's skin to become inflamed, wrinkled and covered in sores. Such a sick, emaciated and hairless animal truly looks like a monster straight out of a nightmare. And since these weakened creatures can't hunt faster prey, they resort to attacking the easiest livestock available, goats and chickens. So, the frightening legend was ultimately just a story of unfortunate sick wild animals. Now let's talk about the most aristocratic and terrifying creatures of the night. Vampires, pale, sun-averse aristocrats with sharp fangs, craving blood. This iconic image, immortalised by Bram Stoker, seems like pure fiction. Yet, the origins of this chilling myth might trace back to real medical tragedies of the past. One prominent theory links the legends of vampires to a rare genetic blood disorder called porphyria. Sufferers experience impaired hemoglobin synthesis, leading to a host of disturbing symptoms. First, they develop extreme photosensitivity. Sunlight causes severe burns and disfigurement on their skin. Second, their skin becomes deathly pale due to anemia. Third, due to cartilage deformation and tissue scarring, their gums recede, exposing teeth that appear longer and sharper, truly resembling fangs. In severe cases, their faces and hands could become grotesquely disfigured. Imagine encountering such a person in a medieval village. Of course, superstitious neighbours wouldn't see a sick individual, but rather a monstrous creature risen from the dead. Porphyria, however, is only one explanation. Another, perhaps even more chilling, explanation for the belief in vampires stems from the crude state of medieval medicine. More precisely, in cases of premature burial. Diagnosing death in those days was notoriously difficult. Someone might fall into a deep lethargic state or coma, their heartbeat and breathing becoming almost imperceptible, leading them to be mistakenly declared dead. Now imagine the most terrifying scenario. A person is buried, only to regain consciousness some time later, trapped in a sealed coffin, deep underground. In a frantic panic, they desperately try to escape, clawing at the coffin lid, breaking their fingernails. They might scream, but their cries remain unheard. Ultimately, they succumb to suffocation. Years later, when the grave is eventually reopened, perhaps to inter another family member, people are confronted with a horrifying sight. The corpse lies in an unnatural, contorted position. Deep scratches mar the inside of the coffin lid, and the deceased's face and hands are smeared with dried blood, stained from beneath broken fingernails. For a medieval person, the conclusion was inescapable. This dead person must have come alive at night, fed on blood, and desperately tried to claw their way out of the grave. In this way, a tragic medical error inadvertently gave rise to a truly chilling legend. From vampires, we now shift our focus to their eternal rivals in folklore, werewolves, humans capable of transforming into wolves under the full moon. This idea sounds utterly fantastical, doesn't it? Yet, just like the vampire legend, this myth also has surprisingly real medical and psychological origins. First up, we have hypertrichosis, an extremely rare genetic disorder informally dubbed werewolf syndrome. In this condition, the entire body, including the face, becomes covered in thick, long hair. Such an appearance, especially in past centuries before science could explain it, inevitably conjured images of wild beasts. Superstitious villagers could easily come to believe that such a person was truly half beast, half human. Just add in a deep-seated fear of wolves, and the legend of the werewolf was complete. It's a tragic illustration of how a rare disease could transform ordinary people into monsters in the eyes of society. However, physical resemblance is only one side of the coin. The other delves into the human mind. There's a real, albeit extremely rare, mental disorder known as clinical lycanthropy. In this condition, individuals genuinely believe they can transform or have already transformed into an animal. Most often, specifically, a wolf. A patient suffering from lycanthropy doesn't merely think they're a wolf. They might feel fur growing on their skin, their fangs elongating. They might start behaving in an animalistic way, howling at the moon, moving on all fours, displaying aggression, and even attempting to bite people. Of course, no actual physical transformations occur. These are purely the delusions of a troubled mind, vivid hallucinations. But now imagine a witness to such an episode in a dark medieval forest. They see their neighbour suddenly collapse to the ground, begin to snarl, howl, and act like a wild animal. For them, this would be irrefutable proof of the existence of werewolves. Thus, the mental illness of one individual could easily spark panic and terror throughout an entire village. Let's turn our attention to another creature from ancient bestiaries, the basilisk. This king of serpents was said to kill with a single glance. While the basilisk gained widespread popularity through the Harry Potter series, its origins trace back much further to antiquity itself. So, where did such a bizarre concept come from? It's highly probable that the basilisk is a fusion of characteristics from several real, highly dangerous creatures. The primary inspiration for the basilisk was likely the king cobra, one of the largest venomous snakes on Earth. It boasts an impressive hood, which it flares out when threatened, creating the illusion of a crowned king. But most significantly, certain species of cobras, known as spitting cobras, can accurately project venom into an attacker's eyes from up to 2 or 3 meters away. Should this venom hit the eyes, it causes agonizing pain and can lead to temporary or even permanent blindness. To an ancient observer, witnessing a snake spit and a fellow tribesman collapse, screaming in agony, this could very well have appeared as if the creature had killed with a mere glance. Combine this with the intimidating appearance of certain lizards, like the Jesus Christ lizard, famous for running on water, and you have the complete picture of that legendary monster. From a monster that kills with a glance, let's turn our attention to one that's nearly impossible to defeat. Recall one of Hercules' legendary labours, his battle with the Lernaean Hydra. This was a serpentine beast with multiple heads, and for every head lopped off, 2 new ones would immediately sprout in its place. Quite the fantasy, isn't it? Yet nature often proves far more inventive than any fiction. Scientists believe that the inspiration for this myth might have stemmed from observations of very real, albeit tiny, creatures. Take, for instance, planarian flatworms. These microscopic organisms possess a truly phenomenal capacity for regeneration. If you cut a planarian into several pieces, each fragment will regenerate into an entirely new, fully formed worm. You can even decapitate one, and after a short while, it will regrow a new head, complete with all its memories. The ancient Greeks, living in close contact with nature, could very well have observed this phenomenon in freshwater worms or similar organisms, such as actual hydras, which is also the name for real-life freshwater polyps. Of course, their imagination scaled up the tiny worm into a colossal monster, but the core principle, lop off one head and new ones sprout, was drawn directly from their real-world observations of nature. Let's talk about giants. Across nearly every culture in the world, you'll find legends of giants, from the Greek Titans and Norse Jotun to the biblical Goliath. Tales of immense, incredibly strong beings have always fired our imaginations. There are a few explanations for this, and both are surprisingly grounded in reality. The first involves, once again, the discovery of ancient bones, but this time not dinosaur bones, but rather those of our own ancestors, or large prehistoric mammals. Imagine early humans unearthing enormous thigh bones from mammoths or extinct giant primates. Lacking anatomical knowledge, they would naturally assume these belonged to giant humans. The second explanation is medical. There's a genuine medical condition caused by a pituitary gland disorder, aptly named gigantism. Individuals with this condition truly do grow to abnormally large sizes. The tallest person in recorded history, Robert Wadlow, reached an astonishing height of 2 meters 72 centimeters. In ancient times, encountering such an individual firsthand would naturally lead people to believe they were witnessing a supernatural being, giving rise to myths of an entire race of giants. So yes, giants did walk among us, but they weren't a mythical race. They were simply people with a rare medical condition. Let's journey back once more to ancient Greece, to the fabled mountains of Thessaly, where legend tells us the centaurs made their home. These fascinating creatures, half human and half horse, were depicted either as wise teachers, like the revered Chiron, or as wild, unruly savages. But where did such an unusual hybrid come from? The theory proposed by historians is quite elegant, and it points to a profound cultural shock. Imagine the ancient Greeks living in their well-established city-states. They primarily used horses for pulling chariots, as individual horseback riding was not a common practice. Then one day, they encountered nomadic tribes from the vast steppes, perhaps the Scythians. For these steppe nomads, rider and horse were virtually inseparable, forming a single unit from early childhood. They spent their entire lives on horseback, eating, sleeping, and fighting from the saddle. to a sedentary Greek witnessing a rider charging towards them for the very first time, this image could easily blend into a single, perplexing and frightening creature. From a distance, the silhouette of a person on horseback, especially in dynamic motion, could genuinely appear as a single, unified organism, a human torso atop the powerful body of a horse. Thus, that initial, astonishing encounter with an unfamiliar equestrian culture might well have given birth to one of the most beautiful and enduring legends, the centaur. Let's jump from antiquity to 20th century America, to one of the strangest and relatively modern monsters, the Mothman. The legend of this creature emerged in the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in 1966. Eyewitnesses described it as a large winged, human-sized creature with enormous, hypnotically glowing red eyes. Its appearance was believed to foretell disasters. Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? But ornithologists offer a much simpler explanation. Most likely the mysterious Mothman was actually just an ordinary owl. But not just any owl, a very large one. Think a great horned owl or a great grey owl. These birds can have a wingspan of 5 to 7 feet, easily comparable to a human's height. Now imagine this. It's a dark night, you're driving, and suddenly, in the glare of your headlights, such an enormous bird bursts out of the darkness. Its eyes, reflecting the light, flash a brilliant red. In the dark, fueled by fright, its silhouette could easily be mistaken for a winged humanoid. The bird quickly vanishes into the night, leaving you with a lingering shock and a story for the rest of your life. So, most likely, there's no mystery here at all, just a large owl and an active imagination. And finally, let's journey to the misty Scottish Highlands, to the shores of Loch Ness, to talk about arguably the most famous cryptid in the world, Nessie. Tales of a mysterious creature dwelling in the loch date back centuries, but it truly captured the public imagination in the 20th century. Every year, thousands of tourists flock here, hoping for a glimpse of its long neck and head breaking the dark surface. But what could really be down there? The scientific community, of course, remained sceptical. The most famous early theory suggested Nessie was a surviving plesiosaur. However, that's highly improbable. The loch's waters are far too cold and lacking in food for such a large reptile to thrive. Modern, more plausible hypotheses are far more mundane. These could be giant eels, which some suggest can indeed grow to enormous sizes within the loch. It could be a group of otters or seals swimming in single file, creating the illusion of one long body. It might simply be floating logs, decomposing at the bottom and resurfacing from trapped gases. Or even common optical illusions and waves, which, from a distance, and in the often misty conditions, the human imagination easily transforms into a mysterious creature. Ultimately, it seems the mystery of Nessie is not a zoological one, but rather a psychological one, rooted in humanity's desire to believe in the extraordinary. And here's the biggest twist. Mythical creatures aren't just fairy tales. They're echoes of the real world reaching us across centuries. They represent humanity's distorted memory of what it couldn't comprehend. When ancient Greeks found the skull of a dwarf elephant on the island of Crete, unaware of its trunk, they saw a single enormous eye socket in the centre and created the myth of the Cyclops. In the Gobi Desert, when Scythians unearthed protoceratops skeletons with their beaks and bony frills, they envisioned the body of a lion with the head of an eagle, giving birth to the legend of griffins guarding gold. Every monster is our ancestors' attempt to explain the world around them. A giant squid washed ashore becomes the all-powerful Kraken. A sick person with a rare genetic disorder transforms into a terrifying vampire. An unknown primate species morphs into the elusive Yeti. These stories don't just reveal how foolish our ancestors might have been, but rather how inventive and creative the human mind can be when confronted with the unknown. So while dragons may not have literally breathed fire, their bones truly did lie in the ground. Myths, it turns out, were an incredible way to preserve and transmit information, albeit in a distorted form. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found it interesting to peek behind the curtain of ancient legends, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new mysteries from history and science. And what mythical creature would you most want to believe in? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read your thoughts.